atmosphere on set?
Yes.
In 3 words, I would say...
Would you say writing this novel took you longer than writing your average fiction piece?
Not really, because, this was inspired by true characters, but it was completely fiction. They were nothing like my parents. Their situation was nothing like my parents. So it wasn't like I took their story and, rewrote it. It literally, the casserole scene where he the first time is what happened between my mother and father when he for the first time. So that was basically the only scene that I didn't completely invent. And so I don't think it was harder in that sense or took any longer.
Colleen Hoover is finally breaking her silence regarding the ongoing Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds lawsuit against Justin Baldoni. And let's be honest, Ryan Reynolds seems to be the one driving the bus with the evidence that's emerging. Hoover is giving an interview to Elle, likely timed alongside the release of her new film, Regretting You, currently in theaters. Despite receiving abysmal reviews from critics, just a mere 28% approval rating, the film has managed to gross an impressive $82 million at the box office. While it hasn't been a breakout weekly smash, it has demonstrated a slow, steady climb, with $44 million of that total coming from domestic earnings. For context, it ends with Us, Hoover's most famous work adapted into film, earned $50 million in its very first weekend. So, comparatively, this new film underperforms, and critics have been harsh, yet it still represents a financial success given the circumstances. What is striking, however, is not just the financial numbers or the critical reception, but the transformation Hoover herself has undergone. This is a woman who, not long ago, insisted that her time was fully consumed by book writing. Her sole identity as an author, deeply immersed in words, characters, and the craft of storytelling. And now, she presents herself as a filmmaker, a producer, and someone actively involved in the visual interpretation of her work. During the interview, Hoover was asked about her involvement on set and whether she ensured that her vision for the story remained intact. Her response was carefully worded, "I wasn't super involved. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to take any credit. I was on set for about 1 to 2 weeks, more as a spectator. I was just there enjoying everything. I felt like everyone that had a hand in this movie brought their own talent and passion. I didn't want to get in the way." She added that she might have intervened if the direction had strayed from her vision, but she never felt that way. The phrasing here is telling. On one hand, Hoover portrays herself as hands-off, almost humble, willing to let others shine. On the other, this claim is contradicted elsewhere. She is listed as an executive producer and has a writing credit on the film. Clearly, she exerted influence over the project, yet she downplays her involvement, presenting a narrative of detachment. It's unusual, even for successful authors, to transition into filmmaking to this extent. Most authors who see their work adapted into film remain firmly in their literary domain. They offer creative input, yes, but they rarely start production companies or claim authorship over cinematic vision. Colleen Hoover, however, is someone who enjoys the spotlight and wields it strategically. She also has a demonstrated tendency to misrepresent the truth. Consider it ends with Us. Hoover promoted the story as being about her mother, yet the truth is entirely different. The characters Lily and Ryle, supposedly drawn from real-life inspiration, are largely fictional. Hoover herself admitted early in the book's promotional cycle that it was inspired by her mother, but not her mother's story. In fact, nearly everything in the book is fictional. The custody battles, the breakups, the births, the dynamics between characters. None of it reflects actual events. The only scene remotely based on reality is the casserole scene. Her father was not a neurosurgeon. Her mother did not run a flower shop. And they did not live in Boston's posh penthouses. Everything else, the struggles, the drama, the intimate moments, are creations of Hoover's imagination. This misrepresentation matters because Hoover has monetized the story under the guise of it being her mother's experience. It's a public relations narrative, a myth designed to sell. This myth has now been weaponized in the current lawsuit drama. Hoover claims that she and her mother are suffering from PTSD as a result of the legal proceedings, positioning this supposed trauma as comparable to real, lived abuse, a claim that is both misleading and inflammatory. To be clear, neither Hoover nor her mother is being sued. No actual abuse is occurring in the way she implies. Yet, she spins a narrative to suggest that the lawsuit's stress outweighs the genuine trauma her mother experienced. This is classic gaslighting, transforming fiction into reality for public sympathy and personal gain. In the same interview, Hoover commented on her new film Regretting You, highlighting its box office success. While $82 million may appear impressive at first glance, it's barely above break-even when considering production and marketing costs. The film's budget was $30 million, and marketing likely added significant overhead. A film must generally earn 2 to 2.5 times a production budget to be considered financially successful. So while Hoover touts the film as a sleeper hit, it is modestly profitable at best, far from the blockbuster status she implies. The irony is compounded when she frames criticism of her work in terms of domestic violence representation. Hoover has repeatedly positioned herself as someone advocating for victims of DV, yet she has admitted that she has never personally experienced such trauma. She has been in a stable relationship with the same partner since age 16, which she describes as healthy and untroubled. This detachment raises serious questions about the credibility of her authority on domestic abuse and the authenticity of her narratives. Hoover attempts to use her mother as a shield to deflect criticism. In her author's note for It Ends With Us, she writes that the story represents one woman's story, and that she is merely exploring what her mother might have experienced. Yet in public interviews, she continues to reinforce the myth that the book is her mother's story, creating a contradiction that blurs truth and fiction. This inconsistency is compounded by her claims that she wouldn't write the book today due to scrutiny and fear of public backlash. The tension between admitting fiction and insisting authenticity is a recurring pattern in her behavior. Moreover, her narrative around PTSD is problematic. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a clinical diagnosis. Real sufferers experience triggers, dissociation, sleeplessness, heightened anxiety, and profound psychological distress. Hoover's public statements about suffering PTSD from a box office outcome or a lawsuit demonstrate a fundamental misunderstanding of trauma. She has never undergone therapy or received a formal diagnosis, yet she invokes PTSD as a tool for public sympathy. This is not only misleading, but diminishes the experiences of actual trauma survivors. When it comes to her involvement in the legal drama surrounding Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, Hoover's statements are equally contradictory. At times, she claims complete unawareness of the events unfolding on set. At other times, she admits to having personal stories and grievances that she could tell, but chooses not to. This selective narrative control enables her to claim neutrality while subtly aligning with Blake Lively. Hoover positions herself as a detached observer, yet her actions and affiliations tell a different story, one of opportunism and strategic engagement. Hoover's transition from author to filmmaker also highlights her motivation. Control and financial gain print media is declining. Book sales are less lucrative than they once were. Self-publishing authors like Hoover must sell hundreds of thousands of copies to make substantial income, and even best-selling authors often struggle with diminishing returns. Her previous book in 2023 reportedly sold fewer than 100,000 copies, a far cry from the 12 million copies sold at End With Us. The economic reality of the literary world likely incentivized Hoover's leap into filmmaking, where the financial stakes and potential profits are higher. This pursuit of control extends beyond money. By producing and co-writing films, Hoover ensures that her vision is realized exactly as she desires. Yet, the irony is that these projects often diverge dramatically from her original literary works. Despite this divergence, she maintains a narrative that she is a victim of circumstances beyond her control, simultaneously leveraging public sympathy and moral authority to shield herself from criticism. Finally, Hoover's repeated lies and misrepresentations create a pattern. She claims non-involvement while asserting influence, minimizes criticism while wielding her mother as a shield, and invokes PTSD without clinical basis. Each statement, each interview, each public appearance serves to reinforce a curated persona, a mixture of victimhood, authority, and control. She is not simply a filmmaker or an author. She is a strategist manipulating perception to align with her interests. Colleen Hoover, in this context, is not merely participating in the drama surrounding Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. She is actively shaping it, inserting herself into narratives where she was previously absent, and recasting fiction as reality to serve her purposes. Her actions raise profound ethical questions. The commodification of trauma, the distortion of truth, and the exploitation of legal and personal controversies for personal gain. These are not minor lapses or oversights. They are strategic, deliberate maneuvers that reflect her priorities and methods. In summary, Part 1 exposes a clear pattern of contradictions in Hoover's public persona. She claims minimal involvement yet holds significant creative and executive roles. She invokes trauma yet has no clinical diagnosis. She positions herself as neutral yet aligns with certain parties. She misrepresents fiction as reality, and she exploits public sentiment to maintain influence. Hoover's transformation from author to filmmaker, her manipulation of narratives, and her strategic self-presentation paint a picture of a person who prioritizes control, influence, and financial gain over truth, consistency, and ethical responsibility. As we continue unpacking Colleen Hoover's involvement in the Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds lawsuit against Justin Baldoni, it becomes increasingly clear that Hoover has carefully cultivated an image of innocence and detachment. Yet a closer examination of her actions, statements, and strategic positioning tells a very different story. The picture emerging is one of a woman who understands the power of narrative, how perception shapes reality, and how myths can be weaponized for personal gain. Hoover's portrayal of herself as a passive, uninvolved party is contradicted by both her professional roles and her documented activity during production. In interviews, she oscillates between claiming she was a spectator on set for a few days or 1 to 2 weeks, and asserting that she had no awareness of the interpersonal dynamics between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Yet records from her own Facebook cohort groups suggest that she was fully engaged, tracking the film's development, and even participating in decisions regarding the script. This selective memory and misrepresentation are classic techniques of narrative control. By publicly portraying detachment, she can later claim ignorance or neutrality, even while her behind-the-scenes actions demonstrate the opposite. Hoover's approach to public perception is particularly evident when examining her repeated use of her mother as a shield. In her earlier works, she suggested that It Ends With Us was her mother's story, a claim now proven largely untrue. In the current controversy, she leverages the same familial association to deflect criticism, suggesting that the stress of lawsuits or public scrutiny has caused her and her mother post-traumatic stress. It is essential to note that PTSD is a clinical diagnosis, and there is no evidence that either Hoover or her mother has received such a diagnosis. The casual invocation of a term denoting extreme psychological trauma as a rhetorical device is a deliberate effort to elicit sympathy while avoiding accountability. Hoover positions herself as a victim, implying that the public and the legal system are responsible for her emotional distress, a striking narrative pivot from her actual involvement and choices. Her treatment of It Ends With Us also warrants scrutiny. Hoover admits the work is 99% fiction, yet she continues to frame it as deeply personal, inspired by her mother's experience. This dual narrative, fictional yet autobiographical, is not uncommon in literature, but Hoover's repeated mischaracterization of her source material demonstrates a deeper intent. She is consciously curating a narrative that maximizes emotional engagement and public investment. This is not merely marketing, it is manipulation. By insisting the book represents her mother's trauma, she positions herself as both an empathetic storyteller and a moral authority on domestic violence, despite lacking lived experience of abuse herself. Hoover's public statements about her own life reinforce this manufactured image. She claims to have been married to the same partner since she was 16, described her life as boring, and emphasizes stability and normalcy. These assertions are used to contrast her perceived innocence against the chaos she frames around Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Yet the reality is more nuanced. Hoover's move into filmmaking, executive producing, and a strategic alignment with Lively on projects that intersect with the lawsuit indicate a clear and deliberate engagement with the controversy. Her supposed boring life is a constructed backdrop, allowing her to appear as an outsider or observer while actively shaping events behind the scenes. One of the most striking aspects of Hoover's public persona is her repeated contradictions. In interviews, she claims she was unaware of on-set events, but also suggests she has her own stories to tell. How can someone be entirely uninvolved yet possess stories that are relevant to the ongoing situation? This inconsistency reveals the central tension in Hoover's narrative strategy. She wishes to maintain the appearance of innocence and detachment while simultaneously positioning herself to benefit from the drama. Her public statements are carefully calibrated, designed to maintain plausible deniability while subtly aligning herself with particular outcomes. Financial motivation cannot be ignored in this analysis. Print media is in decline, and book sales, once the lifeblood of an author's income, no longer provide the same level of financial security. Hoover's previous works have seen remarkable commercial success, but even her best-selling titles have not replicated the phenomenon of It Ends With Us. Her last book, released in 2023, sold fewer than 100,000 copies, illustrating the limitations of the literary market even for high-profile authors. By moving into film, creating a production company, and executive producing projects, Hoover accesses a revenue stream far larger than she could achieve through print alone. Her transformation from author to filmmaker is therefore not only a personal choice, but also a financial strategy. Yet the economic argument alone does not account for the ethical implications of her actions. Hoover's involvement in projects like Regretting You, which she publicly claims minimal engagement with, coupled with her alignment with Blake Lively, suggests a convergence of opportunism and strategic narrative management. Hoover appears to have positioned herself to benefit both financially and reputationally from the lawsuit and associated media attention. Her selective engagement allows her to maintain public innocence while privately navigating influence, ensuring she can claim neutrality if the situation turns unfavorable. The use of trauma as a rhetorical shield is particularly troubling. Hoover repeatedly invokes the idea that she and her mother are suffering post-traumatic stress from legal developments, implying a moral equivalency between criticism, lawsuit stress, and real abuse. This misrepresentation trivializes the experiences of actual survivors of domestic violence, who endure prolonged psychological, physical, and emotional harm. By equating a public relations situation or a moderately stressful legal process with trauma, Hoover manipulates the audience's empathy while simultaneously diverting attention from her own choices and contributions to the conflict. Hoover's pattern of misrepresentation extends to her creative work. While she presents herself as a filmmaker respecting the vision of others on set, her executive producer and writing credits indicate otherwise. These roles inherently involve oversight, decision-making, and influence, directly contradicting her claims of non-involvement. The discrepancy between public statements and private action highlights her skill at narrative framing. By asserting detachment, Hoover cultivates a perception of neutrality, yet her professional engagement demonstrates significant agency. This dichotomy is a hallmark of strategic image management. Hoover maintains the appearance of innocence while exercising influence behind the scenes. Critics of Hoover's approach point to the ethical implications of her dual narrative strategy. The fiction-reality conflation surrounding It Ends With Us allowed her to claim moral authority and public sympathy while generating substantial profit. By asserting that her book represents her mother's experience, she invited readers to engage with a story framed as a personal testimony of domestic abuse. In reality, Hoover created a fictionalized narrative inspired by, but largely disconnected from, her mother's actual experiences. This calculated framing amplifies emotional resonance while obscuring factual accuracy, a deliberate choice with significant ethical ramifications. The strategic ambiguity Hoover employs is further compounded by her media appearances. She positions herself as a neutral observer, expressing concern for the emotional impact on actors and others involved in the lawsuit. At the same time, she claims the public is misinformed and that she possesses insights unavailable to outsiders. This dual positioning allows her to claim moral high ground while subtly reinforcing alignment with certain parties, particularly Blake Lively. Hoover's repeated invocation of incomplete or selective truths demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of media dynamics and public perception management. Hoover's pivot into filmmaking can also be seen as an attempt to consolidate narrative control. Unlike traditional authors, who must rely on directors, producers, and studios to interpret their work, Hoover now has a direct hand in shaping how her stories are translated to screen. By establishing a production company and taking on executive producer and writing roles, she ensures that the cinematic representation aligns with her vision. Yet this control also enables her to manipulate perception. She can publicly claim detachment while privately steering outcomes to her advantage. The broader context of Hoover's actions underscores a recurring theme: the commodification of narrative, particularly trauma-based narrative. By framing herself as a victim or observer of events, she generates public sympathy while enhancing her professional and financial standing. Her claims of PTSD, selective awareness, and detachment serve to elevate her status as morally and emotionally engaged, even as she maintains strategic distance from accountability. This pattern demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of how narratives of trauma, victimhood, and innocence can be leveraged to consolidate influence. Colleen Hoover is not the passive, uninvolved figure she portrays herself to be. Her public statements, professional roles, and strategic alignments reveal a calculated approach to narrative control, ethical ambiguity, and financial opportunism. She manipulates perception through selective disclosure, leverages myths and fiction as moral authority, and conflates public scrutiny with personal trauma. These tactics serve both to protect her interests and to cultivate an image of innocence and neutrality, despite clear evidence of agency and influence behind the scenes. Hoover's actions and statements in this context provide a compelling case study in media strategy, narrative manipulation, and ethical ambiguity. While she publicly claims detachment, her professional and personal decisions indicate a high level of engagement with the issues at hand. By leveraging public perception, selectively disclosing information, and framing fiction as reality, Hoover ensures that she remains a central figure in the ongoing drama, able to benefit from public attention while minimizing personal accountability. As we delve deeper into the complex web surrounding Colleen Hoover, Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and Justin Baldoni, a striking pattern emerges. Hoover's actions are not merely incidental or passive. They reveal a calculated strategy to align with powerful figures while maintaining plausible deniability. This alignment with Lively, combined with her own evolving role as a filmmaker and executive producer, provides Hoover with influence, visibility, and financial leverage, while simultaneously allowing her to distance herself from accountability for the disputes she helped facilitate. One of the key elements of Hoover's strategy is her careful management of public perception. Throughout interviews and media appearances, Hoover presents herself as a neutral observer, a spectator, who merely watches events unfold without interference. In reality, her documented presence on set and active engagement with the film's development contradict these claims. By portraying herself as uninvolved, Hoover crafts a narrative in which any controversy is external to her, thereby reducing the likelihood that she will face scrutiny for her role. Yet, her alignment with Lively in strategic communications, public statement of support, and professional collaboration demonstrates clear coordination, undermining her claims of neutrality. The dynamic between Hoover and Lively is particularly telling. Lively, a Hollywood powerhouse, brings immense visibility and media influence. Hoover, a best-selling author now branching into film, benefits from this visibility, gaining an elevated platform for her projects. The synergy between the two women is evident in public interactions and project collaborations, but it is also strategically useful. Hoover can present her involvement as supportive and incidental, while still deriving the benefits of association with a high-profile Hollywood figure. This duality, appearing both influential and uninvolved, is a hallmark of Hoover's public persona, and it reflects a deep understanding of media manipulation and influence management. Hoover's narrative construction extends beyond her alignment with Lively. She repeatedly invokes her mother's experience and personal history as a shield, framing any criticism or scrutiny as an attack not only on her but on her family. This tactic is designed to evoke sympathy, positioning her as morally upright, empathetic, and unjustly targeted. By presenting herself as a victim of circumstance and public misunderstanding, Hoover seeks to deflect attention from her own choices and actions, all while maintaining influence over the narrative. This is particularly evident in her use of terms like PTSD, which, as previously discussed, is a clinically significant diagnosis not substantiated in her case. The casual deployment of trauma language as a rhetorical device illustrates Hoover's strategic manipulation of emotional perception to cultivate a specific public image. Examining Hoover's professional trajectory highlights another dimension of her strategy, her shift from author to filmmaker. Traditionally, authors rely on studios, directors, and producers to adapt their work, often relinquishing control over the cinematic interpretation. Hoover, however, has established her own production company and taken on executive producer and writing roles. This move grants her unprecedented control over how her narratives are presented, allowing her to shape the story to her own advantage. It also positions her to influence the portrayal of events related to the lawsuit and her alignment with Lively, creating a feedback loop in which public perception reinforces her professional and financial objectives. Financial incentives are central to understanding Hoover's decisions. Print media revenue, while historically lucrative, is increasingly insufficient for high-income authors due to declining sales and the proliferation of self-publishing. Even Hoover's recent works, while commercially successful, have not achieved the unprecedented success of It Ends With Us. Her pivot to film, therefore, represents both an opportunity for greater financial return and a method to consolidate creative control. The commercial success of films like Regretting You, while modest compared to blockbuster standards, demonstrates Hoover's ability to navigate new markets and monetize her intellectual property effectively. The calculated nature of these decisions underscores a deliberate strategy to maximize both influence and revenue. Hoover's narrative management also involves careful control over timing and information dissemination. Public statements are meticulously crafted to present specific images at strategic moments. For instance, by claiming limited involvement in production, while simultaneously asserting that she has stories to tell, Hoover maintains ambiguity, allowing her to shift between observer and participant roles depending on the audience and context. This ability to straddle multiple positions simultaneously is a hallmark of sophisticated media strategy. It enables Hoover to benefit from association with Lively and the film while minimizing potential fallout if public sentiment turns critical. Ethically, Hoover's conduct raises important questions. The use of trauma, familial association, and selective truth-telling to cultivate sympathy and protect professional interests can be seen as manipulative and opportunistic. By conflating the challenges of public scrutiny with the lived experiences of abuse survivors, Hoover not only misrepresents her own situation, but risks trivializing genuine trauma. Her narrative positions criticism and legal scrutiny as morally equivalent to abuse, thereby elevating her perceived victimhood, while obscuring her active participation in the unfolding controversy. The contrast between Hoover's public image and her documented actions is particularly stark in relation to Justin Baldoni. Hoover has repeatedly claimed ignorance of conflicts involving Lively and Baldoni, yet evidence from her private communications and cohort groups indicates a higher level of awareness and engagement. She has also made statements suggesting personal grievances or stories that she could tell, further undermining claims of detachment. This duality, claiming ignorance publicly while privately engaged, exemplifies a broader pattern in which Hoover manipulates perception to control the narrative without assuming full accountability. Hoover's strategic use of narrative extends to the framing of the lawsuit itself. By emphasizing the emotional toll on herself and her mother, she positions the legal proceedings as a source of moral and psychological distress, rather than as a result of decisions in which she participated. This framing allows her to claim victimhood and generate sympathy, while avoiding the appearance of opportunism or complicity. It also reinforces her alignment with Lively, positioning both women as morally aggrieved parties responding to external attacks rather than active participants in the events that precipitated the controversy. Another critical aspect of Hoover's strategy is her treatment of public criticism. She frequently asserts that the truth is unknowable, repeating phrases like, "You don't know the truth," to maintain ambiguity and control the narrative. This tactic serves multiple purposes. It deflects scrutiny, undermines opposing narratives, and positions Hoover as a moral arbiter whose understanding of events is superior to that of the public. By controlling perceived accessibility of information, Hoover enhances her ability to shape perception and influence discourse without engaging in direct confrontation or disclosure. Hoover's narrative control is further reinforced by her professional diversification. By moving into filmmaking and establishing production company, she gains not only financial leverage but also media influence, allowing her to shape public perception of events. Her dual roles as author and filmmaker enable her to present multiple facets of her identity to different audiences, crafting a cohesive yet strategically flexible public persona. This approach enhances her capacity to manage controversy, maximize visibility, and protect professional interests while minimizing exposure to criticism. Finally, Hoover's repeated invocation of personal and familial trauma as a shield underscores the ethical complexity of her strategy. By framing criticism and legal scrutiny as sources of psychological distress, she cultivates moral authority and sympathy, even as her own decisions contribute to the controversy. This duality, claiming victimhood while exercising influence and benefiting from association with Lively, reveals a sophisticated, if ethically ambiguous, approach to narrative management. It also highlights the broader dynamics at play in contemporary media, where perception, influence, and strategic ambiguity can be as consequential as direct action or factual accuracy. In conclusion, Part 3 reinforces a central thesis. Colleen Hoover is a highly strategic figure whose alignment with Blake Lively and careful management of public perception enable her to navigate complex controversies with skill and sophistication. By selectively disclosing information, leveraging familial narratives, and controlling professional engagements, Hoover maximizes both influence and financial benefit while maintaining plausible deniability. Her actions illustrate the interplay between narrative control, media strategy, and ethical ambiguity in contemporary culture, highlighting the ways in which perception can be manipulated to achieve personal and professional objectives. Hoover's dual role as observer and participant, combined with her calculated alignment with high-profile figures and her strategic use of trauma narratives, underscores a pattern of opportunism and narrative control. While she presents herself as morally upright and neutral, her documented engagement and professional decisions reveal active participation and clear benefit from the unfolding events. This duality exemplifies the complexities of contemporary media strategy, in which narrative, perception, and influence are as critical as direct action or factual accuracy. By understanding Hoover's tactics, strategic alignment, narrative ambiguity, selective disclosure, and exploitation of perceived vulnerability, one gains insight not only into the specific controversy, but also into broader patterns of media manipulation and ethical complexity in the modern literary and film industries. Hoover's approach provides a case study in how perception can be managed, influence can be exerted, and ethical boundaries can be navigated or bent for personal and professional advantage. Examination of Colleen Hoover's role in the controversy surrounding Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and Justin Baldoni, it becomes evident that the implications of her actions extend far beyond a single film or lawsuit. Hoover's strategic decisions, Her manipulative narrative construction and her alignment with high-profile Hollywood figures have lasting consequences on her legacy, her credibility, and the ethical standards of the creative industries she now inhabits. One of the most striking aspects of Hoover's trajectory is the tension between her past identity as an author and her present role as a filmmaker. Traditionally, authors occupy a specialized domain: storytelling, world building, and character development. They are creators of narratives, but the translation of those narratives into other media, especially film, is usually handled by professionals who specialize in visual storytelling. Hoover, however, has disrupted this conventional model by taking on executive producer roles, engaging with the screenplay, and overseeing production decisions. While this demonstrates ambition and versatility, it also introduces significant ethical and practical challenges, particularly when it intersects with ongoing disputes and legal controversies. Hoover's approach to professional engagement highlights a core issue: the prioritization of control over collaborative integrity. By positioning herself as both creator and mediator, she inserts herself into roles traditionally reserved for separate, independent professionals. This conflation of creative authority and personal involvement creates opportunities for both influence and conflict. Her presence on set, her contributions to the script, and her strategic alignment with Blake Lively suggest a degree of responsibility for the resulting project that she publicly denies. The deliberate obfuscation between engagement and detachment allows Hoover to claim moral high ground, while simultaneously benefiting from the work she helped shape. Financial motivation plays a central role in this dynamic. The decline of print media and traditional publishing revenues has forced many authors to diversify their income streams. Hoover's pivot to film is a calculated response to these structural changes in the literary market. While her books, particularly It Ends With Us, achieve extraordinary success, the bulk of her work has not generated comparable financial returns. In contrast, film projects offer significantly larger revenue potential and broader cultural impact. Hoover's embrace of filmmaking, therefore, can be seen as both a pragmatic business decision and a strategic effort to consolidate creative control. The alignment with Lively, an influential Hollywood actor with a strong media presence, amplifies the reach and potential profitability of her ventures. However, this pursuit of control and profit is inseparable from questions of ethics and accountability. Hoover's repeated claims of ignorance regarding conflicts involving Justin Baldoni, paired with her documented awareness of key events, raise concerns about transparency and honesty. Her public narrative presents her as a bystander, an observer caught in circumstances beyond her control. In reality, internal communications, on-set documentation, and cohort discussions suggest a more active role. The dissonance between public statements and documented actions undermines her credibility and invites scrutiny regarding her motivations. Central to Hoover's public persona is the weaponization of empathy and trauma. By invoking her mother's experiences and framing criticism or legal disputes as psychologically damaging, Hoover constructs a narrative of victimhood that elicits sympathy while deflecting accountability. This tactic is particularly problematic because it conflates real trauma with reputational challenges, creating an ethical gray zone. True experiences of abuse, whether domestic, emotional, or psychological, are not interchangeable with the stress of public criticism or professional disputes. By blurring this distinction, Hoover risks trivializing genuine trauma and misrepresenting the nature of suffering for personal and professional gain. The manipulation of narrative extends to Hoover's engagement with public criticism. By asserting that the truth is unknowable, she creates ambiguity that protects her from scrutiny and allows her to selectively frame events to her advantage. This approach, simultaneously claiming moral high ground and strategic ignorance, demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of media perception. However, it also underscores the ethical tension inherent in her actions. The deliberate construction of ambiguity for personal benefit, particularly when aligned with high-profile collaborators, raises questions about transparency, integrity, and accountability. The broader implications of Hoover's approach are significant for the creative industries. Authors who transition to film often rely on collaboration, independent verification, and professional checks and balances to maintain credibility and artistic integrity. Hoover's dual role as author and filmmaker, combined with her strategic alignment with Lively, creates a scenario in which influence, perception, and financial incentives intersect in complex ways. While such strategies can enhance cultural impact and profitability, they also introduce vulnerabilities, ethical concerns, and potential conflict of interest. A critical element of this dynamic is the public perception of victimhood. Hoover repeatedly frames herself as psychologically affected by external events, positioning criticism, lawsuits, and professional scrutiny as equivalent to abuse. This framing is inconsistent with documented behavior and professional engagement, and it demonstrates the use of perceived vulnerability as a tool for social and professional leverage. By claiming distress while simultaneously participating in or benefiting from the events in question, Hoover cultivates a narrative of moral legitimacy that is difficult to challenge without direct access to private communications and internal documentation.